The radio crackled once, then went dead, and in that silence the SEALs understood the truth no one wanted to say out loud: they had been left for dead. Dust rolled across the valley like a living thing, the sun sinking behind jagged mountains that turned the world the color of old blood. Somewhere above them, beyond the smoke and the chaos, there were jets that were not coming, orders that would not be broken, and a command chain that had already moved on. Lieutenant Mark Hale pressed his helmet against the dirt and counted his breaths. Around him, 8 men lay scattered among shattered rock and burned-out vehicles, some wounded, all exhausted, every one of them fighting the creeping fear that comes when training runs out and reality takes over. Their extraction bird had been hit on approach. Enemy fighters poured in from the ridges like ants. Ammunition was low, water was gone. The last transmission from command had been cold and final: no air support. No fly zone. Survive if you can. Hale had heard those words before in stories told by older operators, cautionary tales about politics and weather and risk calculations. He never believed he'd hear them himself. He looked at Petty Officer Diaz, whose leg was wrapped in a bloody field dressing, and at Collins, barely 22, hands shaking as he reloaded his last magazine. Hale felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his chest. If this was where it ended, it would end with him standing. Miles away, on a base that looked calm and orderly compared to the hell below, Captain Evelyn, Ghost, Carter stared at the same mountains through a reinforced cockpit canopy. Her A-10 sat fueled and armed, its nose pointed toward the runway like a caged animal. The order was clear, stamped, repeated, and non-negotiable: no fly zone enforced. Enemy air defenses unconfirmed, risk unacceptable. Evelyn had been flying the A-10 for over a decade, long enough to know that rules were written by people who didn't always hear the screams on the ground. She had earned her callsign not because she was reckless, but because she had a habit of showing up where no one expected her to be. Quiet, precise, unforgettable. She had supported SEAL teams before, had listened to their breathing over the radio as she circled above them like a guardian spirit. Today, she was supposed to sit and wait. Then the emergency frequency crackled to life. It wasn't a clean transmission. It was broken, soaked in static and desperation. A voice, steady but strained, cut through. Any aircraft, this is Viking Actual, we are pinned down, casualties critical, grid follows. Evelyn's hands tightened on the throttle. She recognized the cadence immediately. SEALs didn't beg. If they were calling now, it meant they were out of options. The tower came on moments later, firm and distant. Ghost, remain on standby. That call is outside your authorized airspace. Do not engage. Evelyn swallowed hard. She thought of her first instructor, a grizzled veteran who had told her that the A-10 wasn't just a plane, it was a promise. A promise to the people on the ground that someone would come, no matter how ugly it got. She thought of the pilots who had gone before her, who had bent rules and carried the weight of those decisions for the rest of their lives. She keyed the mic. Say again last transmission. Negative, the tower replied. Stand by. Evelyn looked down at the worn photograph taped beside her instruments, a faded image of her brother in uniform, killed years ago in a place that never made the news. She remembered the knock on the door, the words spoken gently, the emptiness that followed. Somewhere in those mountains, another family was waiting for a knock they didn't know was coming. She made her decision. Tower, she said calmly, Ghost is rolling. What? Ghost, abort, that is a direct. Evelyn pushed the throttle forward. The A-10 surged ahead, engines roaring, runway blurring beneath her. As she lifted into the sky, the weight of what she was doing pressed down on her harder than any G-force ever could. She wasn't just breaking a rule. She was accepting whatever came after. Down in the valley, Hale heard a sound he hadn't expected to hear again, a low, thunderous growl that seemed to rise out of the earth itself. At first he thought it was another enemy vehicle. Then it grew louder, angrier, unmistakable. Sir, Collins whispered, eyes wide, tell me I'm not hallucinating. Hale looked up through the smoke and saw it, a dark shape slicing through the sky, wings wide, moving slow and deliberate like a predator that knew it owned the air. The A-10 banked, sunlight flashing off its fuselage. Holy hell, Diaz breathed. An A-10. Evelyn rolled in, heart pounding, eyes scanning the terrain. The SEALs, position lit up on her display, surrounded by hostile movement. There was no time for hesitation. She lined up her first pass and squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 cannon spoke in a voice that shook the mountains. It wasn't just noise, it was authority. The ground erupted where enemy fighters had been advancing moments before. Evelyn pulled up, looped around, and came back again, firing rockets with surgical precision, carving a protective circle around the trapped team. On the ground, the SEALs felt the fear loosen its grip. Enemy fire faltered, then broke. Hale found himself laughing, a short, disbelieving sound torn from his chest. He keyed his radio. "Ghost, Viking Actual, I don't know who you are, but you just saved our lives." Evelyn smiled despite the tears blurring her vision. "Copy that, Viking, I've got you. Stay low." She stayed with them longer than she should have, longer than anyone would have advised. She flew until her fuel warning screamed and her arms ached from the strain. When extraction finally arrived, a battered helicopter racing in under the cover she provided, Evelyn watched the SEALs lift off, one by one, alive. Only then did she turn for home. The fallout came swiftly. Debriefings, raised voices, words like insubordination and career ending floated through sterile rooms. Evelyn listened, answered honestly, and accepted whatever consequences waited. When she was finally dismissed, she walked out alone, unsure if she'd ever fly again. Weeks later, as she packed her locker, a knock echoed through the hangar. Hale stood there in dress uniform, Diaz beside him, Collins standing a little straighter than before. Hale stepped forward and saluted. "We were told to thank you," he said simply. "Not officially, just as men who came home." Evelyn returned the salute, her throat tight. In that moment, she understood something that no medal or reprimand could ever fully capture. Courage wasn't the absence of fear or obedience. It was the willingness to carry the cost of doing what was right when no one else would. The SEALs had been left for dead that day, but a pilot called Ghost chose to become exactly that, a whisper in the sky, a promise kept, a reminder that even in war's darkest moments, humanity still finds a way to rise.